I mean, I think there's a serious doubt now that he can carry on actually being president.
Joe Biden is still president for quite a long time. It's not until November, it's until January the 20th and the next inauguration. And begs the question, as you talked about on the Today programme this morning, of if he's not fit to run a campaign to be president, why is he fit to be president, which is the hardest job in the world, for the next 6-7 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a serious doubt now that he can carry on actually being president. And I don't think it's as closed a book as the Democrats would like us to think, that actually, OK, it's all settled. He's not going to run now. She's going to be the nominee, but he's just going to see out his term, as he said in his letter to Americans. I'm not so sure that works, particularly if he's declining a lot. The logic of it is that he can hand over the brutal and tricky business of running and just concentrate on the world affairs stuff, and there's not much domestically left to do. And you can sort of see a logic there, you know, the odd meeting, the odd phone call, and just being basically a figurehead. The difficulty is that is then hung around Kamala Harris's neck as being, number one, the person who facilitated this person who was not capable of running for office again, pretending that he was capable of running for office again, and number two, being around in a White House where nobody quite knows who's in charge, and that kind of attaches to her in a way that I think would damage her campaign.
That brings us to this whole question of whether lots of people knew that he wasn't, as it were, up to it, and covered it up. Yep. Or was it one of those situations where everybody kind of knew he wasn't just quite as sharp as he used
I thought
to
that was
be?
pretty spicy language as I was trying desperately to shovel Weetabix into various infants this morning at 8:20. I thought it's quite rare to hear someone on the Today programme, and you can do it because you know what you're talking about and you've got great authority on the subject, but you know, you said, was it a cover-up? Yes, it was. And it begs, when is a cover-up a cover-up? It's when large numbers of people know one thing to be true and collectively decide to say something else because it's in their interest.
There's a meme online at the moment, I can't remember where I read this, but things saying America desperately in need of new conspiracy theories because all the ones we've had have turned out to be true. So and there is this kind of sense that, you know, when is a cover-up not a cover-up? Was there a cover-up? I think there is a legitimate accusation to be levelled at individual journalists and certainly members of Joe Biden's team who would have known that the situation was not as they were suggesting it. And the classic thing, I mentioned it on the Today programme this morning, the Jon Stewart stuff. So Jon Stewart does this thing where he plays in quick succession all the people saying Joe Biden's as sharp as a tack. And this was after the special counsel revealed that he didn't think Biden should be prosecuted for keeping documents at home because he's an elderly guy. I can't remember exactly what the phrase was, but an elderly guy. And
suggested that he might forget.
Suggested he might forget, and he was basically and the fight back from the White House then was huge. And really vicious, actually, and people within the party, like David Axelrod, the Obama-era political consultant, later senior advisor at the White House, were really frozen out. They called Axelrod, Biden himself personally called Axelrod a very rude word. You can say, well, it is not that big a deal, but actually it's a really unpleasant, vicious personal attack on someone who is a Biden supporter, but just saying, I think we need to talk about this stuff. So all of that was around, and Jon Stewart did this thing where he played all the clips of people saying as sharp as a tack, and at the end of it, Stewart turns to the camera and he says, do you think they would have recorded any of this? And of course, they hadn't, because it wasn't true. So that's why I use the word cover up, and I'm quite happy to use that word. I think there was knowledge of his condition, and they deliberately withheld it from people.
She's generally thought to have had quite an effective last few months on the issue of abortion, where she's been the Democrats' main spokesperson on the issue of abortion. She's got one big political vulnerability in policy terms, though, in terms of the southern border. There has been this huge influx of people actually across the border with Mexico, and it's quite interesting with VPs. Often presidents give their deputies, their vice president, a sort of couple of issues to fix, and often they're quite caddy about making sure they've got the hardest issues to fix. And migration, as we've often had reason to discuss in a European context, it's really hard. You're dealing with other countries, you're dealing with the most powerful criminals in the world, often funded by drug money. And it's fair to say that's not been a huge policy success, and therefore it's one that, as we've already seen in the first few hours, it's one the Trump campaign will bang on about.
Yeah, unquestionably. And the whole border thing, I mean, there was this disastrous interview that she gave quite early in her time, which I mentioned on the Today programme this morning, where she's asked, have you been to the southern border? And instead of saying, no, but I'm planning to go next Tuesday, she just hums and haws and says, it's not a very good question. I don't think I need to answer that. And then says, I haven't been to Europe either. Yeah, and it's this catastrophically poor piece of politics. And actually, she pretty much withdrew from giving interviews for some time after that. And those sorts of political miscalculation or political ineptitude have really held her back. But you're absolutely right to mention the abortion stuff, because on abortion, she has a very good line, which is that it's a freedom issue. So she approaches it from the point of view of the individual American women's rights to have freedom over what they do with their bodies. And she famously asked a question in a Senate hearing, I think with one of the Supreme Court candidates, one of Trump's court candidates, can you think of any area where the American government becomes involved in men's decisions about their health care? And of course, this guy couldn't, because basically there aren't any. And it was one of those kind of prosecutorial questions that work for her and that worked in the sense that it made a political point as well. And that's the point on abortion that she's now been hawking around the nation. And frankly, abortion is on the ballot this time round. I mean, if there is going to be something that gets out a load of Democratic voters in places where they need to be got out, it will be abortion. And if she can do that, well, yeah, maybe it'll work.
We had a veteran Democrat pollster on the programme, Celinda Lake, say, in a sense, if she could bring enough women to the Democrats to outweigh the fact there aren't enough men who are voting Democrat, then that might be the kind of solution to their problems.
James Carville on to talk about that. He says the party's been taken over by women, he says, and in a way that he says has feminized it and put off men from voting for it. That's and fair. That, he says, is a problem for the party.
Carville, who famously from Louisiana worked for Bill Clinton, was known as the Rager, well, still known as the Raging Cajun.
And he's still raging.
Yeah.
And he's the guy who gave us the phrase, it's the economy stupid.
So the question then is how you frame Donald Trump. If you're the Harris campaign, if she wins the nomination, how does she frame Trump in this contest? Because he'll be, what, 80, what?
He's 78 now.
78
he's
now.
79.
83?
Yeah. I mean, but does that work, though? Because they've just been trying to put someone who's even older in. So can you then say, hang on, your guy's too old? I can foresee some difficulties there. Some bright spark might notice an inconsistency. But I think they will. They'll definitely go for age. And they'll just go for kind of general craziness as well and suggest that Kamala Harris is the safer pair of hands.